Hey everybody, this is the ShadowDragon Podcast, Season 5 already, Episode 1, and today we have a very special guest. That was almost in Dutch, I'm Dutch, so probably everybody knows. But we are very honored to welcome Rae Baker, distinguished maritime intelligence and open source intelligence speaker and investigator. I've known you for quite some time during our time at
Yeah.
OSINT Curious. I know you had a background in graphic design, but you transitioned into the cybersecurity field, and basically you're now a senior OSINT analyst at a large consultancy firm. But also, you really specialized in the maritime world of open source intelligence. You also have a book called Deep Dive: Exploring the Real World Value of Open Source Intelligence, and you speak a lot at conferences at DEF CON, ShmooCon, Layer 8. I've met you on several conferences recently.
Yep.
And you also have some CISP certifications, Ghost certifications. You're an AWS solutions architect. So, very impressive rep sheet, Rae.
Oh,
Welcome.
thank you. It's
Um,
good to be here.
yeah, and we will be talking a lot about maritime OSINT today for the audience. Before we dive into that, I also want to introduce my fellow colleague and teammate, David Cook. Can you please say hi to the audience?
Hello, everyone. I'm David Cook, Director of National Security here at ShadowDragon. And I have to say, Ray, I've been a fanboy for a long time, and I nerd out on sanctions and maritime OSINT. So this is really exciting.
Oh, nice. It's good to
Yeah,
hear.
pretty cool. So, and for the people who don't know me, Nico Dekens, if you want to look me up, look for DutchOSINTGuy somewhere online. You should be able to find me. You're all OSINTers, or at least investigative enthusiasts that tune in. But let's dive into this discussion. Just to get the audience familiarized with yourself, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, but more specifically, what initially drew you into maritime OSINT? How did you develop your methodology for analyzing open source information in the maritime domain?
So I am a self-taught analyst, at least until I got my first job in OSINT. I was going back to school for cybersecurity. I was looking for what what angle to go into because it's such a broad field, and I kind of just stumbled into OSINT. I had never heard of it before. And as a way to teach myself how to do OSINT, we all know you have to practice, you have to do, hands-on training. And when you're doing it yourself, you have to come up with ways to, to teach yourself. Usually that's capture the flags and things like that. I, as someone with a marketing background, I really fell back on that because it was what I knew. So I tried to brand myself, market myself with content. And it kind of went hand in hand with the OSINT hands-on activities. So I would go out to the internet, I would look at Twitter or YouTube or whatever, and the news and pick things that were interesting or that other people were doing, you included. And I would see what you were doing, what I liked about what you were doing, and then I would see if I could recreate it, either the exact same thing or something similar. So I would pick these, I would write a blog about it, and it would kind of pay off because I would be teaching myself at the same time I'm creating content to use as marketing for finding a job. And that's how I fell into maritime OSINT because I just stumbled across every weekend I would just go, to Twitter and look up hashtag OSINT and just kind of see overall what people were talking about. And I went back in time and somebody did some sort of blog on pen testing a vessel, like a ship. And I was like, that's pretty cool. And I had not seen anybody talking about ships and OSINT. So I started thinking, like, what could you do if you were looking into vessels? What would that mean to companies and organizations and like geopolitically? What would you be able to find? And so I wrote a blog and I think it was very basic level, what you could look into if you were looking at a vessel or ships in general using OSINT. And people really responded to it. They started reaching out to me. People shared it, and I thought, this is something. Like, this is something. And then right after that is when people started. I mean, they've always focused on China, but the maritime militia and Chinese illegal fishing really took off. People started using OSINT for that. And Russia invaded Ukraine, and the ship got stuck in the Suez Canal. So maritime really started meshing with social media and intelligence, I think, overall. So I feel like right place at the right time.
Yeah, perfect timing. Yeah, and by hearing you talk about geopolitics already, um, just a question for our audience. When you look at the Black Sea or the South Chinese Sea or any Arctic routes, um, can you talk to the audience how they can find maybe some key indicators, how to monitor maybe potential escalations or maritime hotspots? What's your take on that?
I think a lot of maritime requires some sort of historical knowledge. So to understand why the ships are going in a certain way or why people are reacting in a certain way or why they're angry, you have to understand the historical significance of the area and what wars have been fought, what importance maritime has for that area. Like if we're looking at the Indo-Pacom region, like China, um, there's a lot of shipping, there's a lot of fishing that happens there. There's a lot of shipping. It's a there's lots of shipping lanes, and then you have all the contested waters. So understanding that helps you understand the patterns that you're seeing, and then you can pick out the anomalies. And I spend the majority of my time doing that, finding what is going on now, like baselining an area and then determining what looks anomalous and then aligning that historically with like what I can find out. Is this actually anomalous or, is it because a ship is stuck in the Suez Canal or because they're not allowed to travel in that specific region? So I would say the main thing is start to understand the patterns of the regions you're looking at, and then you could more easily pick out what's anomalous.
What would you describe as an anomaly? How let's say you're a novice, just like you started. You want to teach yourself. Where should someone get started by looking for these maybe red flags or anomalies in general when it comes to the maritime world?
So most vessels, they have a job, right? They're supposed to go from A to point B. And they do it over and over again, whether it's shipping something or carrying passengers, they have a job. If they start to do things outside of what is normally seen for that vessel, that would be an anomaly. So if a ship is going from one port in China to one port in the US every month, the same, and then all of a sudden it goes to Africa, I want to know why. And it could be nothing. They could be have been bought, like they're now owned by another company. They're doing different work, but that would be something that I would key in on. Also, just generally what they're broadcasting. So all ships have an automatic identification system on board, and it pings out their location and how fast they're going and how heavy they are. And if that changes, then that would also be something that would make me look deeper. Like if they're suddenly turning off their AIS, if they're going dark, and they've never done that before, or they enter a certain area that they've never been before, or they pick up cargo from a port they've never been. Those are all kind of indicators that would make me look at them.
So speaking of which, when basically you're looking for indicators and you're using probably some automated tools or some manual tools. Now I know, and because it's also something that I teach in my classes, it's fairly easy for someone on a ship to spoof their AIS signal as well, or to do other things that make it harder for people like you and me to find them. So, do you see that these tools that we use are also evolving, or that they give you more, or maybe even less powers than you used to have, let's say 2 to 3 years ago? Can you talk a little bit about that?
I think the tools are helping us pick out anomalies faster. And one thing I really like about maritime OSINT is that it touches on such a broad swath of OSINT techniques. Like you have to know how to research businesses, you have to know how to research people and ships, and then sanctions and all sorts of things. So you get to kind of dabble in all little bits of OSINT. And these tools are really good at looking at all this data that's out there because there are millions of ships traveling like every day. And if you think about each ping one ship makes every 5 minutes or whatever it is, That's a lot of data. So these tools are quickly able to synthesize that down and say, here, this looks weird. This ship did this thing. But I think just with AI, you always need an analyst to go in and look at it and deep dive into maybe the company that owns it or what its normal patterns are, things you can pick out as a human being to determine if it's actually anomalous or worth looking at.
So how would this work? Let me see how to phrase it. So in retrospect, so let's take an example. So recently, there was a Chinese ship that had a Russian captain on board that was accidentally, quote unquote, dragging something over the bottom of the sea that broke a cable or something. So let's just assume that something similar happened today. It hits the news. What would you do to investigate that, to maybe learn a little bit more about the ship or maybe the captain or the seafarers on board? What would be your approach?
The first thing I would do is I'd look at the area the cable was at, and I would go to the news stories, whatever's out there on the timing and the days that it happened or they think that it happened, and I would try and pinpoint all the vessels in that area at that time. Um, because the ones that they've reported, yes, they have been anomalous, but at the same time, there's been a lot of other ships there that have been very interesting. And I think I posted on Twitter, I think it was maybe 4 cable cuts ago. One of the vessels they had called out, there were also like 3 other that were Russian or Chinese that were in that area that were kind of like hanging out over the cables at the same time. So that would be the first thing I would do is narrow it down to who was there. And then I'd look at their paths. Are they just kind of staying in the same spot for the entire time that they're there, like just hanging out? Is that weird for the area? Or are they just going right over and going on their way? Are they going back and forth? Are the pings showing that they're kind of scanning the bottom or looking for something? And then once I narrow it down to the vessels, I would go and I would look who owns them. And then with Maritime, it's always hidden. There's always company hidden under company and company shell companies. So you really have to get good at understanding the layers of companies. So the one that owns the vessel, if it's called Vessel One, it might be Vessel One Company. Like that could be the name of it because all they own is that vessel, but they're not working alone. So you have to figure out who owns that company and then who owns that company. And then ultimately, does it lead to China or does it lead to Russia? And there's some things we can't do as an ocean analyst. We can't board the vessel, right? So that's how they figure out which one of those is actually the ship that, they need to look at as they go and board them. But we can't do that. And we can't generally look at their finances and things to like verify that they are sending money or gaining money from maybe the Chinese government, something like that.
How about
And
what about some of the commercially available information that's out there, like satellite imagery is getting cheaper, or buying some of the manifest data, and kind of cross-referencing some of that. If you had all the resources in the world, what would you do?
I would definitely have satellite imagery.
Yeah.
So, like Nico said, most of the pings, when they're doing illicit things, they're either turning off their AIS or they're pretending they're somewhere else by spoofing it, or they're sharing um, indicate like their numbers. So there might be 4 vessels and they all claim they're the same vessel at different times. So it looks like they bounce around.
Hmm.
The only way to really verify that is to be there in person and board it or see what's happening, or to have satellite imagery that you can kind of look at to see what's actually going on. But like you said, it's very expensive for the average person to download, especially when the way it generally works is you have to know the day and the time exactly. And normally when I'm looking, I know a range. Like it was here on that day, but might be any hour of that day. And then so you have to pay for each one of those images. And then are there clouds? Is there something that's and now you're paying for the images with the clouds in it that you didn't even need? It doesn't tell you anything. Because I try to use free satellite imagery all the time, but when you're looking at a place like China, I mean, it's cloudy 90% of the year. You don't see anything.
Yeah, yeah, that's pretty rough. So when you look at that, so how important is visual analysis when it comes to? Because I remember, for example, when we had an event in my country some years ago where there was, let's say, a high risk national event where all the world leaders attended. And we knew in the weeks before there were, let's say, a bunch of quote unquote fishing vessels visiting our waters.
Yeah.
And when you looked at the imagery of those fishing vessels, they had an awful lot of antennas on it. Would that be something that you think is important that OSINT investigators look at to make more sense of the data or more sense of what they literally can see with their eyeballs?
Yeah, I think it goes hand in hand. Like you need imagery to do maritime analysis. Otherwise, you're just making I mean, it's always kind of a guess because you can't you can't always verify. But especially with maritime, if you do not have visual confirmation, it is kind of a pretty wild guess because you are assuming that what you're seeing is true and you don't know. So if a vessel is saying it's in the port of Virginia, is it there? I can only go by their broadcast of it, and they can change that, they can manipulate that, unless I see it on satellite or somebody has taken a picture of it to verify.
Yeah, yeah. So when we talk about OSINT, we also very often talk about disinformation, propaganda, misinformation. How common is that in the maritime world? When you look at, for example, conflict zones like Ukraine or maybe near the Gaza Strip, where there's also ships sailing the sea, is this something that you need to deal with? Let's say the flood of accurate or maybe inaccurate information.
I think so. I think like with anything, you have to verify, just assume that it's inaccurate and until proven otherwise. Uh, what I see, and this could just be because of the circles that I travel in and like how many OSINT people I follow. Um, there are a lot of people, especially now, who want to be analysts, who report things, and I'm sure you've seen this, who report things that they feel are true as truth, and it's not necessarily verified or truth. So we see it, an analyst reporting something, we can't always believe that they know what they're doing. So this happens in maritime all the time. Oh, I saw the ship doing this. I went to marine traffic. I looked at its path. It's doing XYZ. It's probably doing something illegal. But then, a trained analyst looks at it and they go, oh, well, they're not allowed to travel that close to Taiwan or whatever, based on their knowledge, their historical knowledge of the area or shipping lanes or something like that. So I
Yeah.
think it's very important to verify everything that you are getting from other analysts online. Like if I post something, don't always take it as fact. Like
No.
verify it yourself.
Yeah, it's the OSINT ABC. Assume
Yeah.
nothing, believe no one, check everything, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially
There's
with the Russia stuff. Everybody wants to post about that. It's very cool. Oh, I saw the ship doing this thing, or they blew up this thing over here, and it moves so fast on social media that not everything gets checked, and then it goes out, and everybody takes it as fact, and that can be dangerous.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think, and I tweeted about this is the difference between OSINT, so open source information, and
Yes.
OSINT, where INT actually is actionable intelligence that's verified, validated, and analyzed. So I think
Yes.
we're discussing this that there are a lot of people that think they know, but it's just the information that they found so far without doing a thorough analysis and showing the facts, showing the sources, showing everything. Correct?
Yes. And there is value in OSINT, I
Yeah, oh,
believe,
sure. Yeah.
because often I found even if they don't have the full context, they're giving a piece of it that is now valuable to me because I do know the full context, or at least more of it. So if they say they saw a ship in a port doing something, they might assume that they're, I don't know, trying to do something illegal, but I know what they're actually trying to do. And now they've given me the name of a vessel and shown me where it is.
yeah.
So it is valuable to other analysts.
It's great
Might
for
not
pit.
always be accurate, but it's little data points.
Yeah,
There's a
exactly.
there's a great op-ed in the Wall Street Journal this morning, talking about the fact checkers and social media, and the quote was, "Fact checkers rule, that fact checkers rule." So it talks about the open source information, then the trolls that come in and say, "No, it's not, it's this, it's that, it's," but the trolls actually offer a very good, they play a role as the police, the internet's policeman. And so for
Yeah.
an OSINT analyst, that's amazing because you can see that back and forth and see what's real, what's not, or at least give more context to it. So
Yeah, it keeps drawing out the conversation and more details. And, we just sit back and like, okay, keep going
yeah.
as I'm writing down my notes.
Yeah. So another example that I wanted to talk about. So this week there was some news by the French newspaper Le Monde, where they talked about that they could figure out employees that work on submarines because they were using the Strava workout app, and they basically showed again where they worked out. And since their profiles were open, it was first of all easy to see where they worked out at a naval base where all the submarines are. But I just me as a person who who is, let's say, specialized in finding people, not necessarily in ships like you. I'm like, hey, if I can find the employees that work on ships or submarines, it could also be a way to track where they are. Because if now all of a sudden that same submarine employee pops up at the other side of the world, they might be on a mission. Is this an approach that you use? And if so, what are some techniques that you can share to maybe track employees on ships that do sketchy stuff or interesting stuff?
First of all, I can't believe anybody's still using Strava on military bases. That's wild. Yes, I use that because like especially if you're tracking like Chinese cargo vessels or something where there are a lot of employees, they love to they're on these ships for months and they get very bored. And I found that many of them post walkthroughs on YouTube of the entire engine room. I mean, they'll just take their camera and like pan the entire engine with all the passwords and everything on there. So I think it's good from a technology view, like you get to see what is on the vessel. But to your point, militarily, you can see when they are on a mission. I do this with ships too. Like one of my tricks is when you're viewing military vessels, they will often turn off their AIS, but they don't travel alone, right? So they're always in a pack. Like if it's a warship, it's always got subs and like all sorts of other ships with it, and they don't necessarily turn off their AIS. So even if you don't have that one, but they always travel as a group, you know where it is because you can see the other ones. And it works kind of with the same with people. You might not be able to see them underwater, but with their Strava, because I doubt that it works down there. But you can see where they go to port, and then you can put the context together. Um, Submarines are notoriously hard to track without satellite views of it, at least in my experience.
Could you look at the some of the negative space on if you know sort of generally who's on a ship, and I know some of these ships have hundreds or even thousands of crewmen on board. Could you look at their kind of social media posts and see when an anomalous spike or decline and determine, maybe they're on an exercise or maybe they're in port. Have you ever looked at that, or is that something we could
Yeah,
use?
like pattern of life. I have. I think that ends up taking longer than just looking for the vessels themselves, to be
Yeah.
honest. Because you have to go back in time so far and like compare their normal routine. But yeah, I would say pattern of life always is a good indicator. Another thing I've noticed is that a lot of military vessels, they have their own emails. So it might be like, Rae Baker at warship123, .gov. And you can kind of determine who works on a ship based on their email. You can enumerate all the emails for the ship and passwords.
Yeah.
Whether they still are the right passwords, I don't know. Probably not. Hopefully not.
Yeah. Let's hope not for them at least. Yeah. So another question. So when you look at this, and we're living in this polarized world where there's a lot of tension and geopolitical conflicts everywhere, what kind of things do you foresee in the near future or maybe the midterm future to help, let's say, stay analysts like yourself and aspiring analysts or well-vetted analysts that are listening to prepare themselves for OSINT in the maritime world for the future? What advice would you give them?
Um, I would say, first of all, start now. Like if you haven't started and you're interested, start now gathering information about historical context of whatever region you're looking at. I find it hard to do the entire world. Like I end up doing various different parts depending on what I'm working on, but it is very hard because it moves so fast to keep track of everything that's happening at one time. And I find this with China and Russia and these undersea cables. Like I will work on Chinese stuff for months and I'll know everything that's going on. And then all of a sudden something happens in Russia and then I'm over there and I don't have the bandwidth to keep track of all of it. And then somebody's like, "Oh, an undersea cable's been cut. Do you know anything about that?" And I'm like, "I don't have enough, there's no space in my brain." So like starting to find the areas that you want to work in and spending time researching that area, what's happened in the past, what's important, why the ports are important, where the most smuggling happens, things like that, depending on what your use case is. I also think AI, learning to leverage AI for maritime is going to be more important in the future. Um, Even things like, tell me what types of vessels often go to this specific port. Anything that could help give you context. And I think as AI evolves, it will become easier to use as a tool for maritime, especially if you have access to maritime data sets that you can download and upload. Um, I think I think those are probably the two biggest suggestions I can make for the future.
Would because I've recently I'm a little, let's say, singles intelligence nerd as my side hobby. So radio signals not
Yeah.
being AIS, but maybe just communication systems. So ships talk to ports, ships talk to ships through radios. Is that something that you think is doable to listen into from an open source intelligence perspective?
There are tools that provide both maritime tracking and RF tracking. Um, and I had access to some of them for a while, and like it gives a lot of information, but I could not figure out how to make it valuable. But it does exist, and I think that it will become more important when people start to get hip to the idea that we're using AIS to track. We saw this in the Red Sea. They used open source data to figure out who to target in the Red Sea. They would look up where the vessels were going to be, and then that's what they would target with drones or whatever. So I say the adversary is someone in the US. They are starting to use more open source uh, tools and techniques and methodology to track vessels and target vessels and stuff like that. So keeping aware of what we're doing, the adversary is probably doing and staying one step ahead is always a struggle.
Yeah.
I saw
Yeah, because sorry, go ahead, Dave.
I saw there's an article a while back. I think it was in Al Jazeera, so take that how you will. But the Houthis were actually just buying commercial location data, and that's how they were targeting some of the vessels coming through the Bab el-Mandab. I mean, if you can
Yeah.
just go buy the data and
It
figure out
probably
what
cost
to
them
do with it.
$100. They
Yeah.
probably bought it from, anywhere we would get it.
Yeah. They used a $2,000 drone and we hit 'em back with a $2 million missile. So gotta figure out that cost offset there. But sorry, Nico, go ahead.
No, no, I was just planning on telling that I know for a fact, for example, on a source like Shodan.io, if you know how to look and how to use the search syntax there, you can technically be able to find, for example, satellite radios on ships, or at least the make and model. And if the people on that ship misconfigured it, it might contain, let's say, a vulnerability that could even give hackers access to that system and literally
Yep.
tap into that ship at any given moment in time. Is that something that you think will increase or decrease over time?
I think it's going to increase as all attacks increase every day. I think a lot of ships have IP addresses, um, and they have a lot of outdated technology. They don't get updated as often as they should. Training is, it's the t same with companies. It's the exact same. Sometimes worse on maritime vessels. So yes, I think that sort of cyber attack will increase. The one part that I always had trouble with is you can find these on Shodan, but how do you correlate them to a specific vessel, right? Because you can search like, specific uh radio whatever. You could search it in Shodan and it'll give you a list of them that are open, but how do you know which vessel they go to? So I think if there's a way to connect those two dots, I think that will be bad.
Yeah. Yeah. For now, it's just looking for Immersat or Comstat and that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. And that's all you find. You're just like, hey, there is a radio somewhere on the ship.
Right. And,
Yeah.
and you can hack it, but like you have no idea who that's hacking or what it's doing. And there's
Yeah.
shore Immersats too. So you don't know if it's on the vessel or if it's a shore based one.
Yeah.
I have a
Yeah.
question for both of you. Um, So if you were a compliance division or risk management division within a small to medium or even a large company, looking at how to mitigate risk on sanctions and maritime risk, what kind of tools would you use? What would how would you configure kind of a team that was looking at this? What would you do? What are the first couple things that you do?
You go first, Ray. You're the
Oh,
guest.
geez. Put me on the spot. Um, so I think there's a lot of tools for sanctions research. Dow Jones, risk and compliance, and I mean, name your name your sanctions tool. They all kind of do the same thing. I think being aware of the vessels that are in your area, or if you're a company, being aware of your fleet and who is operating them, who you are allowing on your ships. Um, Often vessels are utilized for illegal things, but the company that owns it does not know that it's be like it goes out with stuff on it, or it's met halfway through its journey and drugs or whatever are put on it, and then it's shipped to where it's going. So I think having some sort of oversight and look into who is running the ship when it's out to sea. I think that is something that is important. And then monitoring the technology and making sure all the systems are up to date and monitoring cyber attacks and what's happening in the space is good. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, no, it's great.
Yeah, maybe one extra suggestion that I had personally had a little success with. There was a company that reached out to me. They were researching a ship that was allegedly involved with shipping wood that was coming out of the rainforest, illegal deforestation, and they wanted to simply identify the ship. What ship is it? Who owns it? And for those who don't know, all ships around the world have an IMO number, an International Maritime number. But it always has wilded me out. That's always in the smallest font print ever on a ship. It's like you have the name, it's like this big, and then you have the most important number of a ship, it's printed like in mini font. So they gave me some footage, some moving footage, a video, and I was watching it, and I was like, I just can't see it. I have a very good, big, high quality computer screen, but my eyes were just like, nope, can't see it. And then I was like, huh, we have AI now. Maybe with computer vision, maybe computer eyes are better than mine. So I fed that video into that tool, which in this case was nothing more than the Google Vision Intelligence API. And it was able to pick out that IMO number. So
Oh, nice.
now I could at least pivot. And I think these are all little things that we have been discussing throughout this entire podcast. I think there is not one big solution to do OSINT in general or maritime OSINT. It's more about you having the tenacity to figure out something. And most of the times, and then that's the downside of OSINT, you end up on a dead end. And then you need to reach out to your peers or go Googling, just like you are a self-taught OSINT analyst. You start looking, you start searching, and there's always someone that has written a blog, made a little video that will tell you,
Yep.
hey, this is a technique that you could use to extract text from videos. This is a technique to find a radio signal. So kind of comes down to your question, but also not, Dave, but it's just a little thing that I immediately thought of when you raised that question and Ray answered it.
And
Yeah.
finding the IMO like that is great until they paint the numbers on the side into different numbers,
Yeah.
which
Yep.
happens very often.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's that scene in Lord of War where they take the French flag and turn it
Yeah.
sideways and make it a Russian flag or vice versa. The we back in the army we had this demo. Um, there's some hedge funds out there who have, seemingly unlimited resources, and they were using satellite imagery and manifest data to see a ship go into port and come out of port, and they were measuring the water levels
Yep.
on the side of the ship,
The
and
draft. Yeah.
yeah, doing the math on the weight of the ship and seeing what got offloaded there. It's
You
I
don't
mean,
have to do the
wild.
math anymore. It just tells you. Like
Yeah.
the AIS data, like if you go to marine traffic, I don't know if you have to pay, you probably have to pay for it, but you can see when a ship goes to port or halfway through its journey or whatever, if the draft changes, and that indicates if it took on something or if it lost weight. So you can kind of use that to determine if it drops something off at the port or met a ship and then suddenly it's lighter, it's higher out of the water, then it passed something on to the other ship. So we use that in sanctions research a lot
Wow, that's incredible.
for
Yeah,
like
really.
oil transfers and things like that.
So, one question that I always find very difficult to tackle when I research something in the maritime world, and maybe you can enlighten me and as well as our audience a little bit. So, ships have cargo, container tracking.
Yeah,
Is that doable?
it is. What I've personally found is that it's very hard to do unless you know the container number because how do you if you're looking for, I don't know, um illegal giraffes on a vessel and and you know the vessel, you will never be able to figure out the container numbers
Well,
on
it has
there.
to be a
So
very tall container
yes, it has to
for
be a
giraffe.
very tall container. But like I've tried looking at pictures taken of vessels to like zoom in on the little container number on the back, but it's nearly impossible unless you get a really good picture. Or you work for a company that is shipping the stuff and they have the container numbers and then you can track it. But yes, it is possible to track containers if you have the number. Does that mean you know what's on it for real? No.
Yeah.
There are sites that offer shipping data. They'll tell you when ships arrived in the port. They'll tell you what came off of it, but it's all usually self-reported. So if you are the ship and you are working for a company transferring illegal drugs, you're going to have somebody at the port working for you who signs off and says like, yes, this was giraffes on this and not drugs, definitely not. So
Yeah.
it's kind of hard again without visual confirmation or specific context to make sure you're seeing what you're seeing.
Yeah, and I think it's also safe to say that all those loading bills, they are in such a specific slang or jargon that by itself, or at least for me, is a study on its own to understand what's actually being said on those papers.
Yeah, I found all of maritime, like all the aspects take some sort of like you have to research, you have to understand shipping, you have to understand why they do what they do at the port, who works there, like what is a stevedore? Like you have to know all these things to understand what is going on.
Yeah. Maybe how long did it take you to feel comfortable enough to say, hey, now I can call myself a maritime OSINT expert? Because I know you for a while. I know it took some time, but just for those who have those ambitions, and this is something that I talk about a lot. You need to do OSINT to do OSINT, so you need to do homework. So how long was your path?
Oh,
Basically,
geez.
and
I don't feel like an
not to
expert.
make and not to make people feel, oh, now I don't want to do it, because you should. You really should.
I don't feel like an expert. I feel like an imposter every single day. I think a lot of us deal with that. My path, I started in 2019, I think, and I picked up Maritime maybe about 2020, 2021. So it has not been long, but I work for a consulting company and I do a lot of maritime stuff. And now people hit me up all the time. Oh, I found this weird thing and it sucks me in, and then I have to go look, and then we see all this stuff on the news that I have to go look at. So it's constant practice. I don't think I'm an expert. I probably say things that are wrong all the time. Um, but the more I work in a region, then I feel like I have some sort of understanding of the region because I'm forced to do the research. I'm forced to understand why China does what they do or how shipping works at ports because I'm doing a report on it or I have a client that I have to report it to.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. Yeah, and I think I totally agree. I always feel like an OSINT imposter because every day for me it's just everyday trial and error.
Yeah,
Every day I
I
learn
feel like I'm
something
winging
new.
it.
Yeah, every day I forget a technique. I was like, oh, I did something 5 years ago. How did it go again? Let me do some homework. So, yeah, I totally acknowledge that. Yeah, becoming an expert in something simply takes time, but also you need to retrain yourself all the time, even if you know
Yeah.
something. Yeah.
I feel like I didn't call myself an expert until other people called me an expert, and then I was like, oh, okay, I'll take it.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think at least I tend to think that you are way smarter than I am when it comes to anything with the maritime ocean world. So that's a very good thing. So, we're about to wrap it up, and I just want to give you the opportunity to tell our audience where can they find you and anything else that you think our audience should know about you in general or about us in maritime.
You can find me on LinkedIn, under my name. You can find me on Blue Sky or Twitter if it doesn't die. Wondersmith_Rae. I do have a YouTube. I haven't updated in a while. You can buy my book on Amazon. I also have a new book coming out it's supposed to be out in May 2026 if I finish it, which I should,
What's it about?
on
What's it about? What's it about? Promote
it's
it.
AI, a cross between AI and OSINT, but like from an analyst perspective. So I am not an AI expert, but I know what I want AI to do for me and how I want to use it. And I see people so scared to use it. So I wanted to write a book to maybe help people understand that it's not going to take your job. It's supposed to like enable you to work better. And I'll throw some Nicolas Cage references in there and try and make it fun and easy to understand. I'm also keynoting Layer 8. It's my first keynote, so go easy on me. Um, and I'm doing the Sans OSINT conference
Yes, I'll see you there.
virtually with
Hang
Arlo.
on now. You both will be at SANS conference in February in Washington, D.C. Both of you are speaking. Is that correct?
Yes,
I'm
I'm virtual though.
Yeah, I'm
Ooh.
chairing. I'm not speaking. I'm chairing. Yeah,
All right. We'll have to get you a speaking slot. And Nico can't go to SANS without speaking. I mean, come on.
I'm one of the hosts, so
Um, I gotta ask. You gotta give us like 60 seconds on AI and OSINT. Tell us
Oh,
what your
geez.
opinion
You
is.
are under the impression I have started writing the book.
Tell us
Uh,
what you think.
well, I think it's very useful. I use it every day. The hard part is, and I think a lot of people, a lot of analysts grapple with this, is wrapping your mind around, first of all, what it can do, because every day people are posting, here's a new prompt, here's a new thing, and it's very hard to keep up with, especially if you're busy. I find that I want to use AI, I want it to help me, but I just want to sit down and have it work. So I'm trying to write something that helps people use AI without it being annoying. But it also has to be kind of evergreen, right? Because as soon as the book comes out, AI is going to be completely different. So I'm going to again focus on kind of the methodology behind it, how you can enable your team of analysts or you as an analyst to get better data and use the data that AI brings back, how to get more accurate data, how to write prompts. Um, that's what's in my outline. So
Hmm.
if anybody has any ideas, like there's still time.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Ray, I would like to thank you very much for joining our podcast. And to the audience, please feel free to reach out to Ray. I know she's very responsive. And if you have
Yes,
any
please.
questions, you can also send them to us at Shadow Dragon, and we will make sure that we will forward them to Ray. Thanks, everybody. And we will see you hopefully and or hear you at the next one.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks,
Bye.
guys.